In today's video, we continue on with our NHL Offseason Plan Series. Today, we're looking at the fourth-ranked team from the NHL's regular season, the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're a team that has a lot of interesting RFA and UFA options. This team could change pretty drastically for a high-ranking team in the NHL. Today, we're going to take a look at their offseason expectations and what we will expect from them between the draft, free agency, trades, and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs and exploring their off-season plan. They have a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot of names that have been with this team a while, a lot of big pieces that need new deals, and they're going to be one of the more interesting teams to watch, I think. Could be, like I said, for a team that had a really good regular season, a high-ranking team, could go through a lot of pretty significant change. So we'll get into all that here in a moment. Like I said, look at their expectations around trades, free agency, the draft, but we're going to look at their internal business and all that too. But first, let's recap the 24-25 regular season, talk about how the year went, as well as the playoffs here. So again, their regular season was pretty solid, 108 points, had a record of 52, 26-4. They won their division, which is something they hadn't done in a long time. Thought it might be a better way for them not only to get a better matchup for the first round of the playoffs, but to have a better path as well towards getting further into playoffs and having home ice. Of course, they battled their provincial rival, the Ottawa Senators, in round one, which they won in a 6-game series, but unfortunately went on to lose against the Panthers. And, of course, the Panthers went on to win the Stanley Cup. It's twice now that they've lost to the Panthers. At one point, their rivals that they couldn't seem to get past was the Bruins, and now it seems to be the Florida Panthers. So throughout the regular season, they scored 267 goals, 7th best in the league, allowing 229, 8th best in the league, so pretty good results all around. Power play was pretty potent as usual, 24.8 for 9th best in the league. The penalty kill, though, certainly left a little bit to be desired, 77.9 for 17th best. It wasn't horrible, but it certainly, for a team that wants to contend for a cup, could stand to be a bit better. Overall, from a regular season standpoint, they did improve a bit. Year over year, had a 6-point gain. They went from 102 to 108. They went from being in that 2-3 spot to winning their division. Of course, won 46 games last year to 52. So a pretty good difference. First year for Craig Berube. Certainly tried to change some things. They scored 36 goals less. They actually scored over 300 goals a year before. So they took a big step back on that, but they also improved a lot defensively. Their team goals against went from 263 to 229. So they actually improved by 34 goals from that perspective. So overall, they were a much more efficient team in that sense. So good results all around for Berube in year one. The goalie tandem was pretty solid. They both had times where they were out injured, which is the storyline for both their careers, but both played well. Anthony Stolarz kind of took the reins here as the starter in the playoffs, and he did probably have a little bit better regular season, but Joseph Woll definitely played a little bit more as well. Stolarz had a record of 21-8-3, a 214 goals against, and a 926 save percentage. So really, for the free agent goalie who came up from the Florida Panthers, being Bobrovsky's backup last year, had a pretty solid year for year one in Toronto. Joseph Woll had a pretty decent campaign as well, 27-14-1, 273 goals against, and a 909 save percentage. I think that's a lot of hockey for Joseph Woll. Played pretty well. Overall, I can't complain too much. Looking at their individual leaders, Mitch Marner led the way, finally hit 100 points, cracked 102 points for the total season. Willie Nylander at 84. Austin Matthews, who missed time periodically for that mysterious injury, which I believe to be a wrist injury, 78 points. John Tavares with 74. And Matthew Knies had a nice breakout season with 58 as well. They had a real nice season. Of course, they made good moves at the deadline. A lot of the moves seemed to, at least on paper, look like they were going to be good. Added Scott Laughton, who comes over from the Philadelphia Flyers. They traded for Brendan Carlo, of course, a big right shot D-man from Boston. So all in all, they continued to revamp that blue line. Added Laughton, who can be a pretty good bottom six centerman. And hopefully the goal here is not only to be more better defensively, but also a little tougher to play against as well. Like I said, they lost again to the Panthers in the second round of the playoffs. And the worst of it all is they won the first two games. So after winning against the Senators, they go into this series with Florida, pick up a 2-0 series lead, and then in Game 3, they had a multi-goal game in Game 3. But then they collapsed, and the Panthers come back. They get Game 3, and then they go on a run from there. That's both times when the Panthers won the Cup. They both years they had instances where they were almost out, they were down and out, and the team that they were playing gave them a little bit of life, and then they came back. Look at the year before, when the first time they won the Cup, they were down 3-1 against the Bruins, and Marchand had a breakaway in Game 5 and could have polished them off if he scores that goal just right at the buzzer beater breakaway, and he doesn't score. And then they go on to win, and then they can win, and then they knock out the Bruins. Now Marchand's a Panther. Kind of weird how that worked out. Ultimately, though, the Leafs had another collapse. They can't seem to get past the hump here around 2. And you can say what you want. They obviously gave the Panthers a good run, but the team and the management's made it clear that they want to change the DNA. They want to change this team, change the mix, and we're after all these years of this core group being together, it does appear we're finally getting there. So we'll see. Now, cap space wise, they have $25.7 million in space. They have 17 contracts already on the books for next year. Looking at their list of restricted and unrestricted free agents, on the RFA side, we've got Matthew Knies, the first and foremost most prominent one there, Pontus Holmberg and Nick Robertson. Knies is a priority for sure. The latest reports on Knies and the Leafs that they're not close. The belief is Knies is preferring a 3 to 5 year deal. So it looks like he's going to take the same approach as Austin Matthews as far as contract length. And I think the Leafs would love to get him signed longer because the price is only going to continue to go up, but makes sense for him, I guess, too. Holmberg and Robertson, Robertson's a little bit more of a wild card. I don't know what his future holds, to be honest, if it's in Toronto or not. On the UFA side, of course, some big names: Mitch Marner, John Tavares, Max Pacioretty, Steven Lorentz, and Yanni Hakanpää. I think it's fair to say Hakanpää is not going to have another kick at the can here in Toronto. Lawrence is debatable. I wouldn't be shocked if they brought him back on another short-term deal, but it's not a given either. Of course, Pacioretty was a player that when the season first ended, he said that he wasn't sure if he's going to keep playing. It sounded like his family didn't fully move to Toronto or anything like that. So it was a difficult year in a sense. But then we've heard reports since then saying that he sounds like he's decided he wants to keep playing, and that it wouldn't be surprising to see him do another 1 year deal with the Leafs. So we could see that. Hasn't happened yet, but it sounds like there's interest on both sides to maybe make that happen if they can. But of course, the big one's Marner and Tavares. It sounds like Marner's probably not coming back, but we'll get into that here in the next segment. But they're going to be the big names to watch here for sure. As far as players that are eligible for a contract extension, they could extend Scott Laughton, who they just picked up from the Flyers. They could extend Stolars, who of course signed a 2 year deal with the Leafs out of free agency here last year, 1 year in, so he's now eligible to be extended. And really, at this point, the way he's played, wouldn't be shocking if they did that. Bobby McMahon also eligible for a new contract extension as well. He had previously done a 2 year deal and is now halfway through, so could extend. They might take their time with him. Hard to say. That one won't be as much of a rush. But as far as the questions, what are the top questions facing this franchise? The big one is this the end of the era? Is the Mitch Marner era in Toronto done? And it sure looks that way. The belief is that he's not coming back to Toronto, that he's played his last game. The belief is that there's been no negotiations at all, and that there hasn't been, and that there won't be. On July 1, it sounds like Marner kind of wants to have a similar setup that Tavares did when he was a UFA 7 years ago, and kind of wants to hold court and hold meetings and have virtual meetings followed up by face-to-face and kind of drag this out. I'm not sure teams are going to be too crazy about that. They're going to want to know sooner than later if they're getting the player, because if they are not going to be able to sign Mitch Marner, but they know they're in the mix, they're not going to want to go to plans B, C, or D until they know if he's coming or not, right? So I'm not sure how that's going to play out exactly, but it sure looks like Marner's done in Toronto. It's belief that he said that Toronto could have one of those meetings, but really, when you can do that exclusively with them now, why wouldn't, if you're going to have any chance to do it, why wouldn't you do it, right? So I don't know. There's all the talk about changing the DNA and everything, and everything we've heard about Mitch, it sure sounds like there's pretty much no chance that he's returning to Toronto. Now, will JT return? Will John Tavares come back? At the beginning of the offseason, when their season first ended, I would have said, yeah, odds are high. Now I do have a little bit of reason to be skeptical of that, just because like we've heard reports lately that the Leafs and Tavares are still not close. When they did their end of season media, we heard Tavares come out and talk to the media and said, yeah, because he was asked about his future, and he said, yeah, I've already had my exit meetings with Trey Living and Berube, and we discussed the future, and I'm pretty optimistic based on our conversations that I'll be back. But yet here we are several weeks later, getting close to July 1 and no deal. Now, it doesn't mean it won't happen, but it gives enough to have a little bit of skepticism that maybe it won't. The belief was they offered him a 3-year deal around $4 million. That's been rejected. I know in the open market he could probably command $8 million, but I believe that the Leafs are taking a whole different approach here. They've had their players kind of hold them hostage and get paid top dollar, not take any discounts. Like, they've you look around, like all these, like whether it's Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, like they've all been paid handsomely. And I've heard a lot of fans even say, why is it you never hear the Leafs getting a team-friendly deal? Well, because they set the precedent that wasn't what this was about. And when you get guys that are focused on cashing in money and they don't want to leave money on the table, maybe winning's not their top priority. It makes you wonder sometime. That's just how it goes. But ultimately, they've paid John Tavares a ton of money, and it sounds like they like to keep him, but they're going to play hardball. So, again, we'll have to see how things work out. Some think that he's going to end up taking a similar contract that Chris Tanev did. Maybe there'll be a longer term with some, you could say creative methods used, but we'll have to wait and see. But I still think that they'll probably figure it out, but at least right now it's a little bit skeptical if he will. So we'll have to see. But the problem for me is, knowing that they're going to lose Marner, if they play hardball with JT, that's a lot of offense going onto your lineup. That's a lot. I mean, that's almost 200 points. That's what, like pushing 70 goals, like, or whatever. I'm not sure. That's a lot. That's a lot. How do you replace that? There's not that much out there in free agency that you can go to and grab that's going to come close. And if you start talking trades, well, yeah, maybe you make a trade or two, but like you're giving up stuff to get a good player, and so I don't know how they manage that and come out as good, right? So I suspect that they'll figure out Tavares, but we'll have to see. There is a little bit of doubt now. There's some wondering if they do have to go the trade route, especially if they don't bring back Tavares as well. Would they go to Morgan Riley and ask him to waive his no-move clause? Because if they're going to move a defenseman, like a higher-end defenseman, to try to bring in a top forward, he's probably the guy they're looking at. Now, he has control here, but as the longest-serving Maple Leaf and been through a lot of these failed battles in the playoffs, what would his reaction be to saying, we wanted to look at this? So what, would they do that? That's another question I have for their offseason. Right now, I'm leaning towards probably not, but I think they should, to be completely honest. But again, that's because the other big question is, how do you replace all this production that you might lose between Marner and Tavares? And if it's got to be done through trade, what are you giving up? That's the hard part, right? So, they obviously want to keep Nyes, because he would be a piece that a lot of teams would be like, oh, you want to make a trade for so-and-so? Give me Matthew Nyes and we're talking. They're not going to want to do that. So we'll see. Speaking of Matthew Nyes, getting him signed is another big piece. They're far apart of negotiation. So they're clearly, playing hardball there as well. But they definitely want to make sure that they're not in a position where he can be offer sheeted, which I don't think they're too worried about. But you have to have it in the back of your mind there for sure, so that it's something you're taking a look at. Like I said, obviously, makes you wonder, is the team destined to regress? And we won't know the answer until we get through the other side of this part of the offseason and see what they do. But if they lose Marner and they lose Tavares, and let's say they don't want to trade a guy like Riley, or they don't ask him to waive, bringing in other high-end talent to try to replace these guys is going to be pretty darn difficult. What are you giving up? You trading Easton Cowan? You trading next year, future first-rounders? What are you giving up here? It's difficult to say. So they're going to have to score more by committee by the looks of things if they can't get those players replaced, which is going to be challenging to do. For sure, as far as the draft goes, they have no first-round pick. They don't have a fourth-round pick as well. So they have a second, third, fifth, sixth, and seventh. So obviously they'll be somewhat active at the draft, but I don't expect them to be doing too much as far as, I don't expect them to make a trade to get back into the first round or anything like that. I'm not really sure what they would do in that sense. So I suspect they're going to try to do the best they can with their picks to try to get a couple decent prospects. And, maybe they try to package some of the later round ones and move up a little bit or something, but I don't think it's going to be a super eventful time from that sense, at least, unless if they do make trades at the draft, it could involve future picks more so. It's hard to say. I know there's been a lot of connections saying, well, they need to look to some of these other Florida free agents like Brad Marchand and Sam Bennett. And as I record this video, they're still not signed. So they're technically heading towards free agency. But I don't think there's any chance Sam Bennett goes to Toronto. I don't think there's any chance Sam Bennett leaves Florida. I'm saying Bennett re-signs in Florida. I think that's a given, probably something in the 8x8 types of range. I would have thought a couple weeks back that Marchand probably would hit the market and leave, and I even predicted that Toronto might be a spot he would land, and I still wouldn't rule it out, but I think that the odds have increased that he stays in Florida now. Now I would kind of wager on Marchand staying and Ekblad leaving. So as much as those two guys have been kind of targeted by a lot of the fan base and media for being potential replacements if they don't bring back Marner or if they lose Tavares in free agency, I don't know that they're really going to have a shot at either one. That's why I think it could be a disaster if they don't bring back Tavares, they don't bring back Marner. Free agency is not going to have a lot to pick from. So you're looking at the trade market, and then in the trade market, you have to give up a bunch of assets to get a good player. How's that going to work out? I just really wonder how much different this team's going to look next year and how much, regress will we see? I don't know. I mean, if they get Tavares signed, they get Nye signed, losing Marner sucks, but at least it's not as bad as losing both players, right? So they have an interesting offseason for sure. There's no doubt about that. They also had a change in coaching staff as well. Of course, I forgot to mention earlier, Lane Lambert, who was coaching their PK and everything last year. He's gone to be the new head coach of the Seattle Kraken. So, of course, he's off the board there now as well. So another change behind the bench. But ultimately, this Leafs team has a lot of questions. We don't have all the answers just yet. But I'd love to know what you think down below. Let me know your thoughts and expectations for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Will Tavares be back? What kind of contract does Nyes get? And how do they go about replacing this production that they could lose, especially if Tavares and Marner both go? Like, is this team going to be taking a step back before it gets better? Or how's this going to play out? Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.